Hi guys, in this video I'm going to explain about the Greco-Persian Wars. It is a well-known event that people are used to hear about. It even has a famous movie related to these historical facts, but many people didn't know it clearly and what really happened or why it was so important. And that's a shame. Basically, it consists in the first fight between superpowers of the history of the humanity and the born of the same history as a studied subject, thanks to Herodotus, who decided to recopilate the information and important points in order to save it for future generations. Thanks, man. It has other name, medical wars, by the age that they happened. Medical wars consist in a series of conflicts between the Persian Empire during the Achaemenid dynasty and the police of the ancient Greece known as the Iliad. At that time, the clash between the ancient superpowers of that era occurred due to the advance of the Persian Empire over the Anatolian Peninsula and the Balkans, in which many Greek territories were threatened by the presence of Persian forces. These events constituted only one phase in the rivalry between the Persians and the Hellenics, locating the beginning of it, the conquest of Ionia, in the 547 before Christ by the Emperor Cyrus II the Great and as the end of the conquest of Persia by Alexander the Great. This phase is divided into three major war events that began in 409,000 before Christ. Once the Persian Emperor Cyrus II took expansionist ideologies, he began to spread and impose Persian beliefs and practice along the Middle Asia. In addition, the Ionic cities that were under the sovereignty of the Lydia kingdom got conquered when King Creso was defeated by Cyrus II. His successor Darius I the Great ruled Greek cities tactfully and trying to be tolerant. However, like his predecessors, he followed the strategy of dividing and winning by supporting the commercial development of the trade rivals of the Greeks who had been part of his empire. Several economic, political, and ideological factors motivated the general discontent of conquered cities as the support to the commercial development of the Phoenicians by Darius I, who ruled Persia at the time, aiming the rebel against the Persian yoke. That feeling was harnessed by Miletus' tyrant Aristogoras, the mobilized Ionian cities against the empire with the help of Greek police like Athens. Rebel forces joined a fleet of 20 ships from the Athens and Eretria, and later joined many armies of the cities of Hellesponto and Bosphorus, much of Caria, Lycia, and Cyprus. Athens' support was conditioned by its contrary ideologies to those of the Persian Empire and refused to provide to the tyrant Hippias, although no help came from Sparta because the king Cleomenes gave up because they required his army nearby to solve his own problems, and Ionia was too far. The Greek maritime fleet decided to join forces to defeat Miletus, but the lack of organization and scarcity of dialogue between their bosses led them to be defeated by the Persians at the naval battle of Leyte, and eventually taking Miletus, the city was burned down and destroyed, so its inhabitants were deported to Mesopotamia or enslaved. The first big conflict started around 490 before Christ and extends to 492 before Christ. It began because of the desire of the Persian Emperor Darius I to punish those who support the Ionian revolts, especially the Athenians. It said that he even had servants who reminded him of his revenge at dinner. He put his nephew Artaphernes and a nobleman named Datis in charge of the conquest. The Persians began with the conquest from Eretria and then headed to the Marathon plain on the advice of Hippias, an ancient Athenian tyrant who sided with the Persians after his vanishment. Under Miltiades' command, the Athenians decided to leave the defensive game, and when the Persian ships arrived, they lashed out, taking advantage of the dread and the panic. The Athenians achieved a victory over the Persians, capturing 8 ships and inflicting 6,000 casualties against the 192 they suffered. After the Marathon defeat, the Persians decided to go towards the city, taking advantage of the fact that much of their troops were out. However, the rapid movement of the troops and the good organization allowed the Athenians to regroup in the city to face what was left of the Persian army. The Persians, seeing the solidity of the Greek defense and with the demoralization of their troops, began to withdraw. After that, Athens and Sparta signed a treaty of mutual protection for the next attack of the Persian Empire. After the death of Darius I, his son Xerxes ascended to the throne and from the beginning showed interest in conquering the Eladim. The conflict began in 480 before Christ and it lasted for a year, so it ends on 479 before Christ. The war began when Xerxes sent ambassadors to demand their submission to the Persian Empire. Many cities accepted except for Athens and Sparta, who responded by liquidating the emissaries. At such a gesture, the Persian emperor sent a powerful army to rise of between 250,000 and 500,000 soldiers, including his royal guards called the Immortals. Persian troops reached the Strait of Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans and 1,000 soldiers, more from other regions, now led by King Leonidas I, were waiting for them. It is said that when Xerxes ordered them to drop the weapons in exchange of mercy, they replied, "Come and take them," in complete defiance. The environment of the Thermopylae proved to be incredibly favorable to the Greek army, whose main strategy was focused on hand-to-hand combat, although the Persians had a numerical advantage. The narrowness of the environment forced them to attack in waves of few. In each wave, the Greeks killed a strong number of them. However, their defeat came when the Greek traitor Ephialtes showed Xerxes a way to go around the strait. 1,000 Phoenician soldiers were supposed to guard the place, but they covered it and let the Persians pass through. The legend says that Leonidas I, viewing the situation, let go who wanted and stayed there with who decided to fight. Just 300 Spartans and 700 soldiers from other cities faced strong and bravely the Persian army, dying after killed 10,000 soldiers, a critical hit to the morale of the invaders' army. After the war, the Greeks put there a plate with an inscription, which says, "Forain, inform the Spartans that here we lie, obeying his precepts." In this part of the story specifically is based the movie of 300, a very well done film, I must say. It lacks of historical accuracy, but it's entertainment at the end, and it is very enjoyable, so I really recommend watching. Xerxes advanced to Athens, where the Themistocles had regained command after the exile of Miltiades for his tyrant actions. Themistocles, before the imminent arrival of the Persian army, decided to evacuate the city and shelter the citizens in the islands of Salamis, and while the Persians sacked and burned the city, spread the rumor that they would escape using other route, forcing the Persian king to divide his forces. Both in naval battle and on land, the strategy of the Greeks exceeded the numerical advantage of the Persians. Xerxes' ships were very disorganized and hindered each other. And to make matters worse, the Persian soldiers were lousy swimmers compared to the Greeks. The Greeks won the battle and regained Athens. The victory of the Greeks at the Battle of Salamis was only the beginning of the end of Xerxes' expansionist intentions. Although they attempted to retake Athens, both perished in hands of the same strategy. Until then, Sparta's army had already recovered to support Athenians. Upon hearing the news, the Persians retreated to Plataea, where the Spartan and Athenian armies, along with a few others from other places, united to fight the Persians, obtaining their decisive victory against Xerxes. The Hellenic victory also provoked the rebellion of multiple societies besieged by the Persians as Ionians, and in order to maintain their protection, Sparta and Athens created the Delian League. The third conflict happened a little more than a decade later, around the 467 before Christ. The new ruler of the Persian Empire, son of Xerxes, Artaxerxes first decided to raise the conquer of Hellade once and for all, aided by Themistocles, who had been banished by the Athens for his tyrannical attitude and intentions. The advance of the Persians was stopped by the Delian League under the leadership of Cimon, son of Miltiades, reaching as far as Turkey. There, the Greeks defeated the Persians at the Battle of the Eurymedon River in the same year in which the Third Persian invasion began. That defeat meant a strong weakening to the Achaemenid Empire. After the victory in Turkey, Simon begins to reconsider a peace treaty, but the Athenians excelled him for that. Shortly after that, Pericles takes control of Athens and deals with the war for several years, until he brings Simon out of exile to deal with the peace treaty with the Persian king. It is in the year of 448 before Christ when King Artaxerxes first accepted to sign a peace treaty between the Achaemenid Empire and the Elade territories. The treaty was called the Peace of Chaldees and established three conditions imposed by the Greeks to the Persians. First, recognize the independence of the Greek colonies in Asia Minor. Second, desist from any further attempt at invasion of the Elade by the Persian Empire. And third, forbidding the Persians to sail the Aegean Sea, but with the possibility of maintaining trade relations with nearby villages. That was the end of the war between Greece and Persia, as well as the conclusion of the first conflict of two superpowers in human history. The Greek police retained their independence and halted the Persian Empire's advance westwards. Athens became the most powerful city in ancient Greece, whose economic and military dominance would lead years later to the Peloponnesian War. Moreover, the decline of the Persian Empire began with that. The Greco-Persian Wars meant the first clash between superpowers of humanity. The number of troops and resources implemented were of the highest caliber on each side, in addition to being the most predominant empires and cultures of the time. Even so, the origin of the conflict was commercial benefits of the route present in Asia Minor and expansionist desire. The repercussions of the conflict and its events were felt in the surrounding territories, having to take sides in order to survive. The technological and scientific innovations, characteristic of a large-scale wars, also occurred. For example, the beginning of the study of historical events like a subject of Herodotus like its precursor.